Hey y'all, good evening. I am back. I know it's been a minute, but we gonna do this. For those of you that don't know, my name is Kia London. I am the owner and creator of Trailblaze into Language Learning. I focus, ooh, frog there. I focus on everything from the African diaspora. The African diaspora is basically any person who is of African descent. So the African diaspora, diversity, equity, inclusion, and I do want to add belonging, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Um, and in addition to that, really enforcing the intercultural competence, the knowledge of communities, and the intersectionalities of cultures. I'm having a hard time talking tonight, y'all. So bear with me. I've been teaching for 16 years, have taught every grade level K through 12, and I currently teach middle school Spanish grades 5th and 6th. In addition to that, I also um, teach workshops, train other teachers, and I have an additional role in my school community as a diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator as well. So it's really cool to be able to branch and connect what I am learning from that into language and identity and putting all of that into the classroom. So that's it. For those of you that are subscribers, welcome back. We're just going to jump right on into this. So I owe you all a couple videos on my professional development reflections, and we're going to take it one step at a time. This summer, I had an opportunity to um, go to a number of different conferences focused in on leadership, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, as well as language. So it was a very, very fun-filled and enriching summer. With that in mind, we're going to start with the AATSP conference. The AATSP, that is an acronym, and it is the American Association of Teachers of Spanish and Portuguese. And they have a conference every year. By the way, I do want to put a plug in for the AATSP. Next year in June, the conference is going to be in Salamanca, Spain. So make sure you get there. Um, this summer, the conference was in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Big shout out to San Juan. Thank you so much for hosting our conference. What a beautiful, enriching community, and it's just amazing. If you haven't been to San Juan, make sure you go. Um, so with that in mind, this conference was in July, and you have educators from all over the country that attend, as well as different parts of the globe. So I typically how I attend language conferences or just any conferences in general is, especially if it's over a span of 3 days, I do not go to every single workshop. Number one, um, I'm an introvert, if you didn't know. I'm an introvert, and I like my quiet time to recharge so that I have the energy to listen, talk, share, and reflect with other people. Number two, it can get very, very tiring, and you want to give your brain and your mind a break. So if you're ever at a conference that is longer than, you know, 2 days, I don't know, you could probably even do two or just 3 or 4 days. Pace yourself. You don't have to go to every single workshop. My typical rule of thumb is I look at, okay, Kia, what is it that you want to grow on? What do you want to grow not on? Y'all, it's late. What do you want to grow in? What do you want to do more of in your classroom? And what don't you really know about that you need to know about? So those are typically the three things that I think of so that I don't really find myself going to the same workshops, because I get it. We can get comfortable. We get comfortable. We're like, oh yeah, I love this. So I'm going to stick here. That's great. But there's other things that we need to be venturing out in. There's other subjects, there's other discussions. So that's how I do it. So first off, I attended this was like I guess like a guest keynote. I don't know. They called it something else. I can't remember. Her name is Kim Haas. She's on Facebook. Find her, y'all. And she has a page called Afro Latino Travels. Please find her. And she has a show too. So she travels to different, specifically, as far as I know, different Spanish speaking and Portuguese speaking um, communities. But these communities are the African diaspora. So what I mean by that is that, for example, she was in Colombia. She focused in on the Afro-Colombians, right? And so her purpose really is to not only learn and build relationships with, these people, but also to bring more knowledge and awareness of just how rich and diverse our culture is, and bringing more awareness to people that are often not mentioned in the media and or not mentioned often in our lessons and in our curriculum. So please find her. She's on Facebook, Kim Haas, Afro Latino Travels. Okay, I'm looking at the time. So she talked about two trailblazers, Francia and Clemencia. They were basically fighting for the rights of people that were underrepresented in their country. Okay, so you have the indigenous people of Colombia and you have the gold miners, okay, of Colombia. And so August 7th, actually, Francia was elected as the first person of African descent to be the vice president. And she too was a gold miner. And it's an incredible story that she gave. She had their pictures. I highly recommend you all do some research. Just type in the names Francia and Clemencia. And they're doing wonderful work. So stay tuned with that. She also talked about a Brazilian or Brasileño, Afro Portuguese, Jefferson Tolorio. He wrote a book called The Flip Side of Skin. No, I haven't read it yet, but it is on my list to read. And she mentioned that Brazil is at least 55% of African descent. So that's a little bit more than half, you all. And so in the interview with this particular guy, Jefferson, he mentioned that the status of the black male is not good. And I know with here in the United States, we can identify with that because we know that our black males are stereotyped heavily and targeted, especially when it comes to the media. And that's a whole different discussion. I'm not going to go there today, but I'm just reflecting and telling y'all notes. And she also mentioned as a whole that when Kim does talk to Afro Latinos, um, they feel invisible. And so this piece I can completely understand and see because when just picture this, if you were a teacher, if your students don't see themselves represented in the curriculum, they feel like they're not a part of it. And I can tell you from experience that's true. Um, I say that to say I say that to say because earlier in my career, I remember, and I'm going to try and make this short. I started my third year of teaching. I was teaching at a high school um, on the south side of Chicago. It was a charter school. And so the population that I was teaching, predominantly Black. And I remember I was, teaching Spanish. And, you know, I was so excited. I just finished my minor in education degree. I had my teaching certificate. I was ready. And my students just couldn't care less. And I couldn't figure out why. And so I remember I was talking to my assistant principal at the time, and she was just like, she said, Kia, she's like, you have to go back to Africa. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, that's right. I was like, duh. I'm like, that's right. And she reminded me of a time where in undergrad, I studied from a professor. Her name was Dr. Crichlow, and she's wonderful. And it was my sophomore year, and that's when I learned about the African diaspora. That's when I learned more about how through the transatlantic, slave trade. So through the transatlantic slave trade, you had all of my ancestors, um, and they were dropped at different places, across the Caribbean, across Central America, what we know now as Central America, of course, the United States. And so I remember just within that discussion, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, that's right. And at the time, I had no idea. I just went in and I thought, oh yeah, hey, yeah, cool, Spanish, we're going to do it this way. I didn't quite understand how the African diaspora had fit in to Spanish until that conversation with my assistant principal really reminded me. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. And then my practice changed with those students, and I had to bring in a lot of different resources. And eventually I was able to hook them into the language because they can see themselves in the curriculum. So I say that to say, with the invisibility piece, that is important. You want to make sure that your students are being represented in your curriculum as much as you can. Um, okay, moving on, y'all. There were a few other things she talked about, the Afro Puerto Rican, Jesus Cepeda, and the folkloric Bomba group. Bomba is a dance originated in Africa, and I don't want to give it too much away. It is an Afro Puerto Rican dance. It represents history. It represents freedom among the Afro Puerto Rican community. Please look it up. There's so much information on Bomba. You can find it on YouTube, you can find it on Google. And it also happens to be one of my very, very favorite dances to dance once upon a time when I was a professional dancer in an Afro Latin group. So it's so fun, wonderful dance. And then she also talked about Costa Rica, the Bembe dance as well. So that's important. Okay. So the next session I went to, you all, was focused on emotional barriers to teaching and learning pronunciation in the L2 classroom, the second language classroom. This one was really interesting. I found it very linguistic-y for those of you that have studied linguistics. Y'all. Um, there was a lot of phonology type subjects that the presenters were talking about, but there were a few key things from this, and this is what I do want to share um, with you all. There were a few key things. I'm just going to move myself up a little bit. Oh, okay, that didn't work. There we go. Um, so interesting enough, they stated that factors of teaching pronunciation from non-native teacher assistants. There were a couple factors, so embarrassment and the imposter syndrome, right? Um, which I can identify with. I remember, growing up, not necessarily with my parents, although they did speak Spanish to me at home, but formally in school, the higher I got, level I got, in, for example, like advanced placement, AP. I remember being very, very scared to just really speak up and to talk because I was so afraid of, am I going to mispronounce it? Um, I don't know if I'm saying the word right, you know? And so, which brings me to the one point here that I have written down, and I'm skipping around because I'm looking at time. Sounding native. This was brought up in the workshop just as a discussion point. Sounding native became equivalent to good pronunciation. And I don't know, like, I kind of have some thoughts on that. I will say, when I have traveled to different communities, different countries, Spanish speaking countries, and whenever I've spoken Spanish, you know, I've gotten, oh, hablas muy bien, you know, ¿de dónde viene usted? Or ¿de dónde eres tú? You know, and then of course, when I say like, oh, you know, the United States, it's like, oh, okay. And I don't know. I don't know how I feel about like sounding native becoming equivalent to good pronunciation. I think, for me, like when I think about the students that we teach, I just want them to feel safe and to feel comfortable to speak, even if they make mistakes, even if they think they sound, quote unquote ridiculous. Um, and I want them to speak with confidence, and be it they have an accent, then they have an accent. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if, that should be the goal. I mean, I feel like for me, for so many years, I was like, ooh, I need to sound like this speaker. And then I really sound very, very, fluent. Or I need to sound like this person that's a native speaker. And I have come to realization like, no, I really don't. If I am doing my best and pronouncing the words and the way that they, you know, should be pronounced. And of course, over time, over practice, over acquisition. And if the other person is able to understand what I'm saying, then okay. So that's kind of how I feel about that one. That one might be a little controversial for some of us, but I know for me personally, it got to a point where I was just like, I don't need to sound like you to become good at pronunciation, because the fact of the matter is that I am myself. I am not going to sound like you. We grew up in completely two different backgrounds. I am a second language, I do have a second language, which is Spanish, and Spanish is your first language. So no, I'm not going to sound like you, and that is okay. So anyway, we'll come back to that one. Okay, y'all. Um, this one was a really good one. I am moving around, y'all. Okay, so I went to Amor de Lejos, Felices Todos. Um, this was an excellent workshop by, she goes by, I believe it's Senora Jensen. She's a Spanish teacher. She's awesome. Make sure you all look her up. Um, Her first name is Theresa Jensen. She's also a very, very good friend of mine. She had a wonderful workshop on making virtual connections, like setting that up for your classroom, for your students. And Grid Pals came up. I know it's not Flipgrid anymore, but it's Flip. I have my opinions about that, y'all. So, and, ePals, so just different examples of how you can connect with other classes. Um, and just being in a place of being able to structure that. So I highly recommend, if you don't have like an exchange or like a virtual exchange program somewhat set up. I know that's something I'm going to try and do with my students this year. I highly recommend you do that. There's so many different things that you can do with that. Your students will get an opportunity to learn from other classes from all over the world. And this was an excellent workshop to really share about. Okay, I'm gonna move on down. Okay. The other one that I have notes on, I went to Samara Spielberg's workshop. She's another Spanish teacher. Please check her out. She's on Twitter. And she talked about mental health in the world language classroom. This one really pulled on my heartstrings because she too is a middle school teacher. Um, and a lot of what she talked about, like I do, but then there were some things where there was a different mindset where I was like, oh, I really like that. Yes, I can totally do that better. So just some bullet points here. Um, the one thing that stuck out to me was turn and learn in place of turn and talk, right? Because when we think of turn and talk, like, hey, turn and talk to your partner. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to wait my turn until it's time for me to talk. I'm not going to listen, but I'm going to wait for my turn till it's time for me to talk. And I'm not saying that every student thinks like that, but I liked the title, the shift in title of turn and learn. So turn, learn from your partner, because then that gets it in the student's mind of just like, okay, I really need to listen. I need to pay attention to what they're saying so I can learn from them. And I really like that one. Some other cool things she shared was having like an identity day where you create a visual display of something that represents them, that represents the students. You can follow it up with a gallery walk. Um, and then she also talked about a little I don't even know if it was a project, but what I wish my students knew. So she had examples on post-its of what she wanted them to know. And then they would do the same thing. So kind of like what I wish my teacher would know. And so the students would write out, okay, I want Prof. A. London to know that I get nervous in large group settings. But this wouldn't be anything that we would, that you totally display out to the class, but this would be something that you would keep as a teacher. Just really building those connections and establishing those relationships, and promoting that safe and inclusive community. Um, Something else, I love this, remembering the power of friendships. So, with that in mind, there's a number of different activities, you can do with that. Um, she also talked about a mood meter, on a scale of 1 to 10 versus ¿cómo estás? ¿Estás bien? Are you good? Are you bad? Are you okay? Are you feeling bad? Are you feeling okay? Are you feeling sad? But how are you on a scale of 1 to 10? Just to check in. And I love that. And then the teacher hot seat is pretty cool. The teacher sits at the front of the class, kind of like a spin on special person. Um, and then the students can ask the teacher, I don't want to say any question because I believe that there are parameters or certain things, but they can ask as many questions as they want to the teacher within a certain amount of time, which I thought was great. Um, she had some other great ideas like the gratitude journal. I know she's got some excellent examples of those, of what she has shared on Twitter as well. Again, her name is Samara Spielberg. Um, and even talked about playing a song and having them journal. I don't know about you all, but I play music in my classroom. My students love it. Typically, I'll play music the first like 5 minutes, and then they have a choice where they can choose what it is they want to work on to prepare their minds for like Spanish for class. Um, and that's besides like us like learning a song. So she had some great tips. So make sure you check her out. And I am going to stop here, and I am going to do a part 2, but I just don't want to be too long-winded. So I will come back with a part 2, you all. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I hope you were able to, grab some nuggets from this, and I will see you in part two.